Some people don't feel guilty for doing something wrong. They feel guilty for being tired, needing comfort, or wanting someone to stay. They say sorry before asking a simple question. They soften their voice like their need itself might already be too much. They wait until the last second to ask for help. Even then, they explain too much, apologize too much, and still feel like a burden. If that sounds familiar, the guilt did not appear out of nowhere. It usually started in a room where your needs felt expensive. Maybe no one said those exact words, but the mood in the house said it clearly enough. There was tension before you even spoke. A tired parent, a distant face, a sigh from the kitchen, a silence that felt easy to disturb. So we learned something early: want less, ask less, feel less, and life stays calmer. That adaptation can look like maturity from the outside, but a lot of the time, it was fear wearing good manners. You became easy to manage. You read the room fast, adjusted yourself fast, and called it being considerate. But there was a cost hiding under that trait. You stopped experiencing yourself as someone allowed to have impact. Not just big impact. Even ordinary human impact started to feel dangerous. Needing a ride felt like inconvenience. Needing reassurance felt childish. Needing rest felt lazy, almost morally wrong. So you got good at carrying things alone. You handled your feelings privately and your exhaustion silently. People probably praised that version of you: responsible, calm, independent, so mature for your age. But children are not supposed to be admired for disappearing. They are supposed to be met. That is the part many people miss. Feeling guilty for having needs is not always about cruelty. Sometimes it comes from emotional neglect so subtle, it barely looks like neglect at all. You were fed, clothed, and maybe even loved. But your inner world did not have much room. Your sadness complicated the atmosphere. Your fear came at a bad time, and your needs kept meeting delay. So your body made a simple conclusion: if my need creates stress, my safest option is to erase it. That conclusion doesn't stay in childhood. It follows you into adulthood and quietly becomes personality. It becomes the person who says, "I'm fine," while their chest is tight. The person who helps everyone move apartments and never asks for help moving their own pain. It becomes the coworker who takes on one more task because saying no feels rude. The friend who listens for 2 hours, then says almost nothing real about themselves. It becomes a partner who says, "Whatever you want is okay." So often they stop knowing what they want at all. Not because they are easygoing, but because preference feels risky. That's the strange part. The guilt is not only about needing too much. It is often about existing too clearly, taking up emotional space, letting another person feel your weight. When that feels unsafe, you become skilled at pre-rejecting yourself. You minimize the need before anyone else can. You say you're probably overreacting. You say never mind before the conversation even starts. You ask for the smallest version of what you need. Then you feel ashamed for wanting even that. And over time, this creates a very specific kind of loneliness. You can be surrounded by love and still feel untouched by it. Because being loved is not the same as being known. And being known requires showing the need you were trained to hide. That is why kindness can feel strangely uncomfortable. Someone offers help, and your first instinct is to refuse. Not because you don't need it, because receiving it makes you feel exposed. If you grew up having to stay easy, support can feel like debt. Care can feel like something you have to earn back immediately. So when someone does something gentle for you, your body doesn't always relax. Sometimes it braces. You say, "You really didn't have to do that," and you mean it on several levels. You mean, "Thank you," but you also mean, "Please don't make me feel visible right now." This is why some people cannot rest, even when they desperately need rest. The body may be exhausted, but the guilt stays loud. Rest feels undeserved when your worth was built around usefulness. Slowing down can feel more threatening than burnout. You may lie down and feel relief for 10 seconds. Then the inner pressure starts. You should get up. You should answer that message. You should do something so nobody can accuse you of needing too much from the world. That pressure is not random. It often comes from a childhood role. Maybe you were the responsible one, the calm one, the helpful one, the child who caused the least trouble. Maybe adults leaned on your maturity because they were overwhelmed themselves. So you learned a painful equation. My value is highest when I need nothing and give everything. That equation can build a very capable adult. It can also build a deeply lonely one. Because when your whole identity forms around being the steady person, your own hunger becomes embarrassing. Your tenderness feels like poor timing. Even your body can start joining the pattern. You notice what you feel late. Someone asks, "How are you doing?" And your mind goes blank. Not because nothing is happening, but because you were trained to skip that question internally. You may know what everyone else is feeling before they say it, but your own feelings arrive delayed, like mail forwarded from an old address. This is what emotional self-silencing does. It doesn't just hide your needs from others. It hides them from you. It turns self-awareness into a slow and sometimes painful process. Then people look at you and assume you're naturally low maintenance. They think you're just private, just strong, just independent. But a lot of private people were not born private. They became private because openness had consequences. Maybe the consequence was disappointment. Maybe it was being ignored, teased, interrupted, or told you were dramatic. Maybe nothing dramatic happened at all. Maybe your needs simply landed on a face that looked tired one too many times. That is enough for a child to start editing themselves. Children are extremely loyal to connection. They will blame their own needs long before they blame the people who couldn't hold them. It feels safer that way. So instead of thinking, "I deserved more attunement," the child thinks, "I should be easier." That belief can survive for decades. It shows up in relationships in quiet ways. You don't ask for reassurance until resentment has already built up. You said yes when you mean no. Then you feel secretly hurt that nobody noticed your yes was forced. You want closeness, but when it comes near, your body starts negotiating an escape. Part of you wants to be held, and another part feels caught. So you send mixed signals without meaning to. You long for depth, then become vague the moment you are invited into it. You want someone to stay, but you fear the price of being fully seen, because being seen once meant becoming inconvenient. This is also why boundaries can feel dirty to people like this. A simple limit can trigger disproportionate guilt. You say, "I can't do that tonight," and then spend 3 hours replaying it, not because the boundary was wrong, but because the nervous system heard danger. Some part of you still believes that disappointing people is the same as losing love, so every boundary feels like a tiny betrayal. And yet the opposite is slowly betraying you. Every swallowed need leaves a quiet mark. Every forced smile adds distance from yourself. Every unnecessary apology teaches your body that your existence requires compensation. After enough years, the person starts feeling empty in ways they can't explain. They are competent, dependable, even admired. But inside, there's often a private famine. They have spent so much energy being safe for others that they no longer feel safe inside themselves. That emptiness is not selfishness, it is deprivation. It is what happens when a person becomes fluent in giving and nearly illiterate in receiving. It is what happens when worth gets tied to self-erasure. And this is important to say clearly. The pattern may look beautiful from the outside. It may look like patience, humility, generosity, self-control, or exceptional maturity, but not every admirable trait was formed in freedom. Some traits were formed in adaptation. Some were built by a child trying to prevent stress, conflict, rejection, or emotional abandonment. That does not make your strengths fake. It means they came with a hidden tax. Yes, you became thoughtful, but maybe you became thoughtful by monitoring everyone's mood before honoring your own. Yes, you became reliable, but maybe reliability became the mask that kept anyone from noticing how alone you felt. Yes, you became self-sufficient, but maybe self-sufficiency was the only way you knew to preserve dignity. That is why this pattern is hard to untangle. It is woven into qualities the world rewards. People celebrate the person who never asks for much. They call them grounded, humble, easy to love. Meanwhile, the person is quietly starving for permission. Permission to need, to interrupt, to rest, to be disappointed, to want more than crumbs. And maybe the hardest part is this: you may judge in yourself while you easily forgive in others. If a friend is exhausted, you tell them to slow down. If you're exhausted, you tell yourself to push harder. If someone else needs reassurance, you understand. If you need reassurance, you suddenly feel weak, clingy, or embarrassed. That double standard did not come from wisdom. It came from old emotional training. You learned that other people were real in a way you were not. Their needs counted automatically, while yours had to justify themselves. So even now, you may present your needs like a lawyer building a case. You gather context, soften the language, and prepare for rejection before the other person even responds. But healthy care does not require a courtroom. You are allowed to need things before the evidence becomes overwhelming. You are allowed to speak before you are falling apart. You are allowed to ask while the need is still small. That can feel unnatural at first, almost embarrassing. Because for many people, the shame is not only in needing. The shame is in being witnessed while needy. There is a difference. One is about the need itself, but the deeper wound is often relational. It is the memory of reaching and not being met well. The memory of being too emotional, too inconvenient, too much at the wrong time. So adulthood becomes a strange performance. You keep proving you are easy to love by asking for almost nothing. But love built on your disappearance never reaches the deepest part of you. It can only comfort the version of you that stays hidden. This is why being the strong one gets so complicated. People admire you for surviving in a way that may still be hurting you. They see composure. They do not always see suppression. They see discipline. They do not always see fear. They see independence. They do not always see the child who learned that depending on others felt humiliating or unsafe. And if you are that person, you may have trouble calling this a wound at all. It just feels like who you are. That is how survival patterns work. They settle in so deeply they start feeling like identity. But there's a quiet difference between who you are and what protected you. One feels alive, the other feels tight. One brings clarity, the other brings guilt every time you reach for something human. So the real question is not whether your needs are valid. They are. The deeper question is why validity still doesn't feel believable in your body. Why asking can still feel morally wrong even when your mind knows better. Usually, that is where childhood is still living in the present, not as memory alone, but as expectation. The expectation that your need will cost too much, that someone will pull away, harden, sigh, judge, or silently resent you. And until that expectation is gently challenged, guilt keeps doing its job. It keeps you small enough to feel safe. But small is not the same as safe. It is just familiar. Familiar pain can feel trustworthy. Freedom can feel suspicious at first. That is why learning to have needs is not just a mindset shift. It is a relational and nervous system shift. It may begin with tiny moments. Asking for clarification instead of pretending you understand. Saying you're tired before you become unreachable. Letting someone help without rushing to repay them in 5 different ways. Naming a preference before the restaurant order arrives. Admitting you felt hurt before the hurt turns cold. These moments sound small, but they are not small to the person whose childhood taught them that need invites trouble. They are acts of self-return. Not dramatic rebellion, just honest presence. A little less editing. A little less apologizing for taking up air. And no, this does not mean becoming demanding. It means becoming real. People who feel guilty for having needs are often terrified of becoming selfish. But most of them are much more likely to abandon themselves than overvalue themselves. That fear itself tells you something. It tells you how carefully you have tried to deserve love. You were never trying to take too much. You were trying not to lose connection. There is grief in seeing that clearly. Grief for the child who learned to stay quiet so the room could stay stable. Grief for the teenager who acted fine because nobody had space. Grief for the adult who still confuses deprivation with strength. But there is also relief in naming it, because what is named can stop pretending to be personality. Maybe you were not naturally low need. Maybe you were highly adaptive. Maybe you were not born unbelievably easygoing. Maybe you just learned that your inner life was safest when hidden. Maybe what looked like maturity was actually early emotional negotiation, a child trying to be lovable by being light. And maybe the exhaustion you feel now is not failure. Maybe it is the cost of carrying yourself so carefully for so long. If this is your pattern, it does not mean you are broken. It means your tenderness had to become strategic. It means you learned how to survive environments that did not fully welcome your dependency, your feelings, or your ordinary human need for comfort. That survival deserves compassion, but it also deserves honesty. Because the same pattern that protected you then can starve you now. It can leave you loved on the surface and unseen underneath. At some point, the old skill stops being protection and starts being isolation. That is usually when the guilt becomes unbearable. Not because your needs got bigger, because your life finally got tired of shrinking around them. So if you feel guilty for having needs, the guilt is not proof that your needs are wrong. It is evidence of what your younger self had to believe to stay connected. And maybe that is the sentence worth keeping. You were not hard to love. you were taught to feel hard to care for. There is a difference, and it can change everything.